This is the first lesson in a new part of grammar. In the first quarter, we talked about the parts of speech. Now we're going to be talking about parts of a sentence. When we discuss parts of speech, that's discussing what the word is, parts of the sentence. Now we talk about what the word does. It's the function that each word has in the sentence. And you'll still need to know your parts of speech to help you find the parts of the sentence and identify them. So that was good background, but now we're going to be moving on to a new subject. Speaking of subjects, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about subjects, which I think is usually the easiest part of the sentence to identify. So the subject is the thing that does the verb in the sentence. It performs the action. It's what the sentence is all about. It's the star of the show. And so usually the subject is pretty easy to find. When you're looking for the subject of the sentence, find the thing that the sentence is about. If you're having a hard time, find the verb and then ask yourself who or what is performing the verb. And that will be the subject, because the subject always performs the verb. There are a couple of things that are always true about subjects. First of all, subjects are always nouns. They have to be a noun. It can be a common noun, it can be a proper noun, it can be a personal noun, it can be a pronoun. We'll get to pronouns in a little bit. Subjects often come at the beginning of a sentence. Not always, but often. And again, later I'll show you why a subject wouldn't be at the end of the sentence. But subjects are usually at the beginning of a sentence. Thirdly, a subject is never in a prepositional phrase. In fact, as we're studying parts of the sentence, you'll soon learn that everything we're looking for doesn't come in a prepositional phrase, but especially subjects. So if you find a noun that you think is doing the verb, but it's in a prep phrase, you're wrong. And you'll hear me say many times that one of the first steps I'm going to ask you as a student to do when you're looking for parts of the sentence is to cross out the prepositional phrases. Take them out of the equation and simplify things. So, subjects are always nouns. They're often at the beginning near the beginning of the sentence, and they never come inside prepositional phrases. Let me give you some examples. My dog likes to walk in the park. So, walk is the verb. Who's doing the walking? My dog. My dog is the subject. Dog's a noun. It's at the beginning of the sentence. It's the subject. We have never been to Italy. We is the subject. It's the one doing the verb. Never been. And we is whom the sentence is all about. It's the star of the show. All of the students have to do their homework. Now this is a tricky one. Students feels like the subject, but it's in a prepositional phrase of the students. That means the subject has to be all. All must do their homework. And we'll do a few more examples of those coming up. When the subject is a pronoun, be careful. There are, in English, separate pronouns that we use for subjects and separate pronouns that we use for objects when we're talking about people. The subject pronouns, I, you, he, she, it, we, they, who. Those, when we're talking about people, those are the pronouns that we use as a subject. When it's an object, and in future lessons we'll talk about objects, object pronouns, me, you, that one's the same, her, him, it, that one's the same, us, them, whom. Notice that him, them, and whom all end in M. There's a little hint. So those pronouns are never the subject. They never do the action of the sentence. In fact, when we get into it, you're going to find out that they have stuff get done to them. So when you're looking for a subject and you think you found one and it's a pronoun, make sure it's the I, you, he, she, we, they, who type of pronoun. And as you'll remember from your old parts of speech lesson, there are different other pronouns, but those are the personal pronouns. Here are some unusual circumstances with subjects. First, I mentioned earlier that the subject is usually at the beginning of the sentence. Well, here's why the subject wouldn't be in a question. In a question, the subject often gets moved later in the sentence. So you might have something like, "How were you today?" Well, you is the star of the show, the one that is today, and so you is the subject, even though it's in the second half of the sentence. In a question, things like question words and helping verbs get put in the front, and things like the subject can get pushed farther to the back. Also, does the grocery store sell dog food? Well, find the verb, sell. Who's doing the selling? The dog? The food? No, the store. And so even though it comes later in the sentence, store is the subject. Another example, where are your two dogs? Well, you have the word are, it's a linking verb, and what thing is being discussed? The dogs. And so even though dogs is the last word in the sentence, it's the subject. It's the one that your sentence is about. Another tricky thing could be a compound subject. Once we get more into grammar, we're going to find that the word compound comes up a lot. Compound just means two. You have two things or more. And so subjects can be compound too. That just means there's like two or three or four things being the subject, just more than one. And as you can imagine, there's usually a conjunction linking those. So you might have something like, my aunt and uncle live in Florida. Well, who lives? Aunt and uncle. Those are both subjects. And if I were asking you to find the subject of that sentence, you would need to identify both. And they're joined by a conjunction. Or you could have, neither my dad nor mom like it there. Who likes it there? Dad, mom. And they're joined by the conjunction nor. So you can have multiple subjects. Now here is definitely the hardest part about finding subjects. In fact, once you get into it, you'll find that subjects are usually very easy, except for this. In a command. A command is when one person is telling somebody else to do something, like when your folks say, clean up your room, or your teacher says, get out your books. Those are commands. I, as a teacher, am telling you to get out your books. And in a command, the subject is often invisible. There's still a subject, but it's not actually written. So when I say, get out your book, the subject is you. So you get out your book. Now, this can be you singular, or if I'm just talking to one student, or you plural, y'all, if I'm talking to the whole class. But when I say, get out your book, the subject is you. Because when I'm looking at you and I tell you to take out your book, you is the subject. But it does sound awkward in English to say, you get out your book. It sounds kind of robotic. So we drop the you and just say, get out your book. But you is the subject, always. This subject is called the you understood, because everybody understands that you is the subject. So we'll often be talking about the you understood. And if I want you to identify the subject, sometimes I'll ask you to just write the word you after the sentence and put it in parentheses. That will be our kind of shortcut to show that the subject is the you understood. So don't say there isn't a subject, say it's the you understood. Some examples could be, go get the car. Well, somebody is looking at you and it's obvious that they're talking to you, and so they say, go get the car. And the subject is you. Or, clean your room. Well, the subject is you. You go clean your room. Let's talk more about that example, clean your room. Obviously, clean your room, the subject is you. But you might also have, please clean your room. Well, please isn't the subject. Please isn't doing the cleaning. You are. So the subject is still the you understood. Or right now, clean your room. Well, right now tells when it happens. The subject is still you. Now look at this example. Doug, clean your room. So I'm looking at someone named Doug, and I say, Doug, clean your room. Well, it's still a command, and you is still the subject. Doug is an exclamation. It's a word I say to get the listener's attention. I could have said, hey, clean your room, or come on, clean your room, but instead I said, Doug, clean your room. So the subject's still the you understood. And every year, students have a hard time with this you understood, and especially when I have the person's name, like Doug, comma, clean your room. They want to say it's Doug, because the person I'm talking to has the name Doug, but the subject is still you. Here's one way I can kind of prove that Doug, comma, is not the subject. So let's look at the example, Lucy, comma, have a nice day. Well, we've spoken before about how we conjugate verbs and how the verb matches the subject. And I don't say, I is a teacher, I say I am a teacher, or you are a student. The subject fits, the verb fits the subject. Well, in the sentence, Lucy, have a nice day, well, if Lucy's the subject and to have is the verb, if the verb fits the subject, you would have said, Lucy has a nice day. But we didn't. We said, Lucy, have a nice day. That's because when you is the subject and we have the verb to have, we just use have. Like, you have a dog, you have homework, you have a nice day. So when I say Lucy, comma, have a nice day, the conjugation of the verb proves that you is the subject and not Lucy. All right, let's do some more examples. There is a cucaracha in my burger. Cucaracha is Spanish for a cockroach. There is the word at the front of the sentence, and it's very tempting to say that there is the subject, but it's not. Cucaracha, the cockroach, is the thing that's in the burger. There and here are not subjects. They're not even nouns. They're actually adverbs because they tell where the verb takes place. So cucaracha is the subject. Here is my lost pen. Ooh, this is tricky. Again, here looks really tempting to be the subject, but it's not that we're finding the location of here, it's the pen, and here is an adverb telling where it is. So pen is the subject, even though it's the last word in the sentence. So pen is the subject. The Dodgers are my favorite team. Dodgers are the subject. Baseball is my favorite sport. Baseball is the subject. Running is my favorite activity. Running is the subject. To run at night is very difficult. Now this is tricky. Earlier in the year we talked about how to is not your friend because when to comes in front of a verb it's infinitive, and infinitive verbs don't actually act verb-like. They're more like nouns because they're sitting there unconjugated. In this sentence, to run at night is very difficult. Well, to run is actually the subject. This is very rare, probably won't put that on a test, but I just want to cycle back to infinitives and show you why it acts like a noun. And to compensate, comma, I carry a flashlight. Who carries it? I do. So I have to be the subject. Let's do a couple more examples, but these are tricky because they are the indefinite pronouns, which gave a lot of you a hard time in the first quarter when we studied pronouns. So, one of my favorite movies is E.T. Well, movies looks like a really tempting subject. Movies equals E.T. But the hard part is, of my favorite movies is a prepositional phrase. Well, if you block that out, either cross it out or maybe put parentheses around it, you're left with one is E.T. Well, now it's obvious what the subject is, one. That's why it's so important to simplify those sentences, get those prepositional phrases out of the way. Another example, nobody in my class likes it though. Maybe class looks like a subject. It's very tempting, but if you cross out in my class, because you know it's a prepositional phrase, and you kind of get that out of there, you're left with nobody likes it though. Nobody is the subject. It's an indefinite pronoun. And lastly, surprisingly, all of my teachers like it too. So teachers, it's a person, and it feels like a subject because the teachers like it, but grammatically that's not true. Cross out the prepositional phrase of my teachers and you have all like it too. All, the indefinite pronoun, is the subject.